life. You grab it, and you get used to doing what you are forced to do. Of course, it happened that some of them croaked, sure, but that's life.
This project is completed in record time. But the canal is too shallow for most ships and frozen over half the year. Its construction cost the lives of 150,000 men.
Yes, this canal project was the idea of our leader. Truly, a grand idea. But maybe the job was too tough for some of the workers.
In this rare footage, Stalin officially hands over the canal to the Soviet people. He hates these ceremonies, but he tolerates them because they reinforce the notion of the Stalin miracle. And while Stalin takes the credit, men like Genrikh Yagoda, standing here at Stalin's side, do the dirty work. Yagoda is the notorious head of the NKVD, the political police. His job is to procure the slave laborers. By the mid-1930s, there would be 10 million forced laborers in the Soviet Union. Slaves to the vision of the Communist Party and Joseph Stalin. 1932. Stalin's modernization is taking a terrible toll on Russia. Apart from the major construction sites, the country is calm as a cemetery. This village has lost its struggle for survival. Even those who are not forced to slave in a gulag are close to starvation. Whatever food is left is distributed to industrial laborers. Meanwhile, the rural population is left to starve.
I recall very precisely. Our neighbor, an old woman, came to my mother and lamented. No bread on the table, but Stalin on the wall.
The people of the Ukraine are particularly hard hit. They had resisted collectivization more stubbornly than anyone else.
It started in spring. My older brother suddenly became very sick. We used to have our own well on the farm in those days, and so our neighbors often came by to get water, and they dropped in to see us too. One day they noticed that my mother gave a piece of beetroot to us healthy siblings, but not to my sick brother. The poor little guy climbed down from the stove with his last ounce of strength, because he was hungry too, naturally, and also wanted a piece. Our neighbor said, "Go ahead, give him something." But my mother replied, "No, I have to save my healthy children at least." My brother started to weep bitterly and returned to his sleeping place on top of the stove. A short time later, he died. When the undertaker came, he pulled my brother from the stove and put him on the hearse. And then he grabbed my mother and laid her next to my dead brother, although she was still alive. I started to cry, but the undertaker only said, "Shut up. You want me to have to come again tomorrow? She is barely breathing."
People can only save their lives by escaping. But Stalin has the roads blocked and train lines suspended. There is no way out. Millions of Ukrainians are trapped. The next year, almost impossibly, it gets worse.
One day, a classmate was absent. After a few days, our teacher suggested that we start looking for him. When we ran into his neighbors, they warned us not to go into the house. Something horrible had happened to him. He had been killed by his own parents, who had gone mad from hunger. And they had cut him into pieces, pickled him in a barrel, and had started to eat him.
The sheer murder of people as a result of this is almost incalculable. My God, this was a catastrophe beyond imagination.
While 5 million people are starving to death in the Ukraine, Stalin exports 5 million tons of grain. Life in Moscow is very different. Those who are willing to follow the party line and submit to Stalin's will are rewarded with cars, pleasure trips, and a glittering nightlife. There is no doubt in their minds whom they have to thank for that.
Поднять бокалы за великого Сталина, который ведет нас по светлой дороге к коммунизму.
Stalin lives with his second wife in Moscow. His first wife died in 1907 after just 3 years of marriage and the birth of their son, Yakov. In 1917, he married Nadezhda Alliluyeva, a teenager and ardent communist. Their life together is lived in almost total secrecy inside the Kremlin. And while they have 2 children, Vasily and Svetlana, Nadezhda sees very little of her husband. This is one of only 2 pictures that exist of the couple in 15 years of marriage.
The picture with the Rolls Royce. Take a good look. Stalin is sitting in the front next to the chauffeur, and in the back sits a very lonely, hunched-up young woman. See? That sums up her situation precisely. She is miles away from him, and she is very lonely.
Nadezhda wants to escape from the golden cage that is the Kremlin and make her own way as a Soviet woman. At the age of 30, she starts to study at the Moscow Engineering Academy.
All the students who came to the institute from the villages told her about the terrible poverty and awful hunger that prevailed throughout the country. She was shocked at this and told him about it. Of these students, nothing more was heard. They were all killed.
She tried to talk to him about it, and that caused outbursts of rage because Stalin was not just a husband. He was a Georgian husband. He was a husband from the East who would not allow his wife to have a different opinion. A different opinion in his eyes was tantamount to betrayal.
In fact, there's a letter that Stalin wrote to his wife in which he asked her not to participate in politics and to not allow herself to be manipulated by people into passing information to him or serving as sort of a back conduit, an unofficial channel to communicate things to Stalin.
November 17th, 1932, the 15th anniversary of the October Revolution. In the evening, there is a festive reception at the Kremlin. It is a boisterous night of dancing for the party elite. But somewhere on the sidelines, a fight breaks out between the Stalins.
That evening, he behaved terribly at the table, threw pieces of bread at her and insulted her publicly in front of others, so that even the wife of the defense minister, Voroshilov, said, "Let's go. The gentleman is not in a good mood tonight." He was very aggressive, and she stood up and walked out.
Nadezhda leaves the party in despair. The situation for her has become unbearable. Exactly what happened next is not clear to this day. A shot is fired.
He killed her. It's not important how he killed her. Whether he killed her with his own hands, or whether he drove her to suicide.
Stalin issues an official statement that she died of an inflammation of the appendix.
When he saw her lying in her coffin, he pushed her away and said she went as an enemy. And now, on the basis of my experience of life, I think he realized that she had seen through him. And what she saw was not the way he wanted to appear.
Stalin is now known as the ingenious man of steel and proudly boasts of his achievements. In January 1934, he convenes what is called the Party Congress of the Victorious. And while the delegates celebrate Stalin, they also praise another person, Stalin's close friend and aide, Sergei Kirov.
Sergei Kirov was the head of the Leningrad Party, very powerful. He was young, he was handsome, he was Russian, whereas Stalin was Georgian. People adored him.
After the upheaval of industrialization and the madness of collectivization, many party members favor a softer kind of communism. They support Kirov and elect him to the Central Committee by a wide margin.
That came as a great shock to Stalin. And in the course of the Congress, some activists also approached Kirov with the proposal to name him as Secretary General and have him lead the party in Stalin's place.
Kirov declines the offer. But he has become far too popular and poses too great a threat to Stalin. December 1st, 1934, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Sergei Kirov leaves a party meeting at his official residence. At the same time, a 30-year-old Dmitry Nikolaev slips through a side entrance. 3 minutes later, they meet. 3 shots, and Kirov is dead.
Stalin had Kirov killed. From the 17th Congress on, he regarded him as his rival. And since power was everything for Stalin, since he did not know anything but power, he decided that all his rivals had to be done away with.
The Kirov assassination triggers a wave of unbounded terror. Murder has become legitimate government policy.
Of the delegates of the 17th Congress alone, 90% were shot, because so many of them had voted against Stalin, and since he did not know exactly who had voted against him, he had everybody shot, to be on the safe side. After all, Stalin was Stalin.
98 Central Committee members are shot. 1,100 party members are arrested, sent to the Gulag, executed. Stalin calls them enemies and spies. He will soon turn Russians against Russians.
Смерть этим врагам! Смерть этим паразитам! Вот какой наш должен быть протест этим врагам!
Stalin's assassination of Sergei Kirov sparks a wave of political executions across the country. Now Stalin sees a new danger: enemies, traitors, spies who have infiltrated his government.
Hysteria was provoked. The so-called spy mania, the fear of spies that had allegedly infiltrated the state on every level.
Вся наша страна от малого до старого ждет и требует одного: изменников и шпионов, продавших врагу нашу родину, расстрелять как поганых псов.
With this line of argument, masses of people could be arrested and incarcerated with no other justification.